Today we're going to create some upgrades for our crossbow tower. So I'm going to start off by creating a tiled background. I'm going to use the upgrade frame image. I'm going to name this object upgrade frame. Its position is going to be 480, 4, and the size is going to be 11240. The initial visibility for this object is going to be invisible, because when we first start the game there will be no tower selected that we would need to upgrade. Inside of this we're going to have our first button, so let's insert a sprite. And let's load the range upgrade button. We will call this range upgrade. The position is going to be 500, 24. The size is going to be 32 by 32. The initial visibility is also going to be invisible. Then I'm going to add some informational text. So let's get a text box, put that right underneath our range button. We'll call this the range info. This will hold the current value of our range variable. Our position is going to be 484, 46. Size is going to be 32 by 32. Our alignment is going to be centered, and the text is going to be the initial value, so 100. Then we need a text box for the costs. So this will be range cost. Position here is going to be 623, 0, and our size is going to be 176 by 30. Text for this is going to be costs, space, range, space. That should end our text box right at the edge of our screen, and this is going to be different than the next two upgrades right underneath it because they will not have the cost part in front of it. Now that we've added all of our new objects, let's go and add them to our event. First, so that our start of layout doesn't get too unwieldy, I'm going to remove my cell button set invisible and go back to layout, find my cell button, and make its initial visibility invisible. That way this just ends up not being quite as long by having a bunch of invisible objects here. We don't do that with the text labels because we have to set their text anyway, so it's easier just to set the text value or set the text to blank instead of changing the text and making it visible or invisible. So I have two new text values, so I'm going to copy my bottom one and paste it twice. If I double click on one of those and click back 2 times, I can change the object I want to apply that to. So I'm going to do range cost, hit next and done, and it should be the same thing, set text to blank. Cell value, I'm going to go back, change that to range info, next, done. And so now my range cost and range info both set text to empty string. Next thing I want to change is my build controls. And what I want to do here is add another condition to this event so that I don't deselect whenever I choose the upgrade frame. So you can just copy and paste one of these, and instead of being frame, I'm going to choose the upgrade frame instead and hit done. That should be the only change I need to build controls, so let's switch to upgrade controls. I'm actually going to copy this condition because I need it here on my upgrade controls. I don't want to deselect whenever I am touching the upgrade frame, so I only want this to happen when I'm not touching the upgrade frame. So here's where I set a bunch of things invisible and my text values to blank whenever everything's deselected. So I'm going to copy my cell button and paste it twice. And I want this to instead be my upgrade frame. Should be invisible. And my range upgrade button should be invisible. I also want my range cost and range info to be invisible, so I'm going to copy those, paste those under cell value. Then I want all of this information to show up when I select the crossbow. So instead of resetting my upgrade ID to -1, I set it to the crossbow's ID. Instead of these 3 things being invisible, I want them to all be visible. So let's put upgrade frame visible, range upgrade visible. Cell label and cell value are set. My range cost and range info also need to be set. instead of destroying my range, I'm going to create a range object. So my range cost and range info need to be determined. So my range cost is going to be my label. So it's going to be costs, colon, space, range, colon, space, close quotation marks. Use ampersand to concatenate our text with the crossbow.turret.range value. So whatever the current range is, that's how much the upgrade is going to cost. The range info is just the value of the variable, so that's crossbow.turret.range. Since our crossbow turret behavior already has a range, we don't have to add in a new instance variable for our crossbow to keep track of the range. If we were to test this, we could create a tower, deselect it, and then when I select it, I have my range button, the current range of 100, and the current cost of 100. Now what I want to do is make the upgrade actually possible. So under upgrade controls, I'm going to add a new sub-event. And that is going to be when we touch an object, and the object that we touch is our range upgrade button. And also, we're going to want to choose the specific crossbow that we have selected. So let's go to System. Let's do Pick by Comparison. We want to choose a crossbow object whose crossbow instance ID is equal to the upgrade ID that we saved earlier when we clicked on the object. This means anytime we reference crossbow, it will only refer to the one crossbow that we chose here. We're going to add another condition, and this is also going to be a system compare variable. We want to compare our money to our cost, which is crossbow.turret.range. And our money should be greater than or equal to that range. And since we've already picked the specific crossbow, it will only compare to our current crossbow's range to determine if we have enough money. Once we do our upgrade, there's a few things we need to do. First, we need to subtract from our money. And that's going to be our crossbow.turret.range. Then since we've added to the value of our crossbow, we need to change its cell value. So let's add action, crossbow, add to cell value, and that's going to be crossbow.turret.range times 0.8. It's important that you change this and this before you actually change the value of your range, or these will be calculated incorrectly. Now that we've used those values, we can change the actual range. Let's go to the turret section. We're going to set our range. Anytime you are in a crossbow event, it's a good idea to use self instead of crossbow. Self.turret.range plus 20. Since we did a pick, if we use crossbow.turret.range, that would work just fine. But we're going to stick with best practices, which means we should go back and change this one to self as well. Then we had several things that updated. Our cell for changed because we changed the cell value. So let's copy and paste that. Our actual money changed. So let's go up to the top, grab a money label, and paste that. Our range cost and range info both changed. So let's copy and paste those. And since our range actually changed, we need to resize our range object. So let's add a new action to our range object, and we're going to set our scale. 1 is the normal size, 2 is double, and 0.5 is half. Since our range went from 100 to 120, we want this to evaluate to 1.2. The way we can do that is we can get the crossbow turret.range and divide that by 100. So if the range is 100, this will evaluate to 1. If the range is 120, it will evaluate to 1.2. Assuming we did everything correctly, I should be able to run this, create a crossbow, select it, And whenever I hit the range button, the cost should change, the value should change, our money should go down by 100, and our sell value should increase by 80. And instead of the sell label up here, let's delete that and replace it with the sell value. We actually want the number that it's going to sell for, not just the label that says sell for. So let's copy that and paste that right underneath our money label. Then let's test that. Crossbow. Check our range. That increased our range value, the cost, our money, and our sell value. Now we'll notice when we deselect it and reselect it, since we haven't set the scale of our range object when we created it, it's not the right size. So let's go back, and we're going to take our scale, copy that, so that when we create our range object, we'll rescale it right after it's created. One last thing to check: if you're having trouble clicking on your range button, double click on it, go to your collision polygon, and make sure that that is set to the bounding box of your range button. That way you can click anywhere on your button and it still work. Create a regular size crossbow, and then a larger size crossbow. We can upgrade the size of our larger one, deselect it, get the normal size, get the large size. And then next time we will add another upgrade.